Boxing fans, I'm here with the well-respected analyst, Al Bernstein. Al, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Good to be with you, Chris.
Thank you. First off, congratulations. You had a big weekend recently, elected into the 2012 International Boxing Hall of Fame. Just what was that whole experience like for you, if you could tell me?
It was daunting, actually. It was almost surreal. It was like one of these weekends that you know is going to fly by like a blur, and I tried to slow down every moment of it, but it still felt like a blur. But it was great. The fans there, for anyone that's never been to one of the Boxing Hall of Fame induction weekends, it's an amazing event. The fans are very, there's a close proximity between the fans and the people that are, that are the celebrities that come there, the great boxers and everybody, and those that are being inducted. And it was just a grand experience, so humbling.
Got you. And some of the other inductees like Freddie Roach, Mark Johnson, I mean, what was it like kind of being around them? And
well, yeah, it was great. Well, this group of people that were inducted, we all kind of, except for Mark, who was maybe a little younger, and so the 90s was when he came into people's consciousness. Tommy Hearns, Michael Buffer, Freddie Roach, and I, we all kind of came into people's consciousness in the 80s. And so we were kind of a certain era. And I joked at the induction ceremonies that maybe part of the reason we were honored is because we survived the 80s, which wasn't easy for most of us. It was a lot of fun being had in the 80s. But it was, so being inducted with them, of course, made it even more special.
Got you. And a lot of people, they know you from your work they see on Showtime. But if you could kind of flash back to when you really first had a passion for boxing and you really first started, really getting into the sport.
Well, when I was back in the Stone Age, when the dinosaurs used to clump around and I was a 9-year-old, I used to go down to the edge of the stairs from my bedroom, where in the living room my dad was watching the Friday night fights. And I wasn't supposed to be up, so I was just out of eye shot from him. And I would listen to him watching the Friday night fights, and I would hear Don Dunphy, who of course was the great broadcaster of that era. And it fired my imagination. And then finally I got to go down and watch the fights with him. And of course that was, a great moment, a great bonding moment. And one of not that many I had, because he died when I was 11. But the excitement of boxing had gotten me, and I used to sit with my little transistor radio with the covers over my head when I wasn't supposed to, staying up too late to listen to Ingemar Johansson and Floyd Patterson fight. And so it fired my imagination for the sport.
Great.
And I really loved it.
Awesome. And just through being involved in the sport, what have been some of just like your best maybe memories or experiences? Well,
I've had three distinct, I started in 1980, and so I've had about 3 decades of the boxing, and so you can almost compartmentalize the memories in that way. Obviously, I mentioned the 80s, which were an extraordinary time. I started on ESPN Top Rank Boxing Show in 1980, and then I was lucky, very pretty early in my career to be able to do a lot of those major pay-per-views in the 1980s involving the Four Kings, Hagler, Leonard, and Duran and Hearns. And so as 1983 was the first major pay-per-view I did, which was Roberto Duran and Marvin Hagler. And that was pretty impressive. And then Hagler Hearns was a seminal moment for me in 1985, because that fight was and still is a fight for the ages.
Right.
And I did that with Al Michaels, I believe, called it. And Kurt Gowdy was the host of it. So here I am 5 years into my broadcasting career, and I'm working with Al Michaels doing this show, and Kurt Gowdy's a host, and it's Hagler Hearns. And I'm sitting there at ringside, and I'm thinking, what other seat in this world would I want to be in than this one? It was very fortunate. The best fight I ever did, that is a memory for me, is the Diego Corrales Jose Luis Castillo fight in 2005. Extraordinary fight. And I'll never forget the feeling I had doing that.
Wow.
That was an amazing fight. And the other fight that always sticks with me that I announced was the third Israel Vasquez Rafael Marquez fight.
Gotcha.
Because these two tremendous fighters separated by this much, even at the end in the third fight. They end up having a fourth fight, and Marquez won. And in a way, I think that was poetic justice, because then they split the series.
Right.
But it is extraordinary.
And being an announcer, just being ringside, and just what is just that feeling like to where maybe you have the excitement of of really watching the event, but you have to put your whole focus on paying attention to the details of the fight.
Yeah, that's a good question, because you can never be a fan. You're not supposed to be a fan.
Yeah, exactly.
And yet you want to convey the excitement of the event to the fans.
Right.
So when something moves you, it should move you.
Right.
However, you're not supposed to cheer. You're not supposed to get out of control.
Mm-hmm.
You're supposed to show excitement and still, as you said, focus in on the fight and keep your wits about you. We are paid handsomely to do what we do.
Okay.
And that's your job.
Right.
And so people that don't do their job in that regard, shame on them. But you can be excited and still be focused on the event at hand.
And if you could kind of take viewers kind of inside of your life, like, I know you do a lot of traveling. There's just a lot of legwork you have to do. What does your life consist of to where you have to do everything on your end to make sure, you're doing the best?
Yeah, when you're traveling this much, and I have other responsibilities. I'm executive producer of the boxing channel, so I work during the time when I'm not doing my road trips. You have to make sure of two things. One, that you do all the research you're supposed to do and handle all the paperwork that comes your way and all the rest of it. And then secondly, make sure that you're focused and prepared when you go on the road to do the fights you're doing. And you've already done what you're supposed to do, and you're going to do more when you get there.
Gotcha.
And sometimes that travel schedule, listen, I have the greatest job in the world, but there are moments when that travel schedule creates havoc in your life.
Really?
It just does. I mean, and I think you have to really be focused to not let that affect you.
Got you. And I know you recently had a book published. If you could just share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm very excited. It just came out. It's been published by Diversion Books. It's called 30 Years, 30 Undeniable Truths.
Okay.
And it's basically, it's a fun book. It's a humor book. I take kind of a humorous look, for the most part, at all the people and events that I've covered, and tell some funny stories. And there are some poignant moments in the book. For instance, there's a chapter about my take on sportscasting today and some of the issues that I have with what's going on in the world of sportscasting.
Okay.
But for the most part, just a fun book. People can get it at Amazon.com, and they can get a paperback or an ebook. It's also at BarnesandNoble.com and all the other places.
Gotcha. From when you first got into boxing to now, how have you seen the sport change for the better and maybe for the worse in some ways?
For the better, well, there's three. It's divided into three sections for me. The 1980s, great. Boxing was fantastic, couldn't be better. Media was covering it, everything was perfect. 1990s, by the end of the 1990s, boxing had hit an abyss. It still had stars like Roy Jones Jr. and De La Hoya. Tyson had come back to the picture, but they didn't make the matches people wanted to see for the most part, and the mainstream media stopped covering boxing about 2000, 2001 maybe.
Okay.
Then the decade of 2000 to 2010, boxing rebuilt its product. Since that time, boxing has put on a tremendous product, but the star power hasn't been there as much, except for people like Pacquiao and Mayweather, because the mainstream media isn't covering the sport in America. Now, internationally, a whole different story.
Okay.
Internationally, boxing is thriving, and I don't think the sport, all sports have their issues, but internationally, boxing is as healthy as it could possibly be, and has a number of international stars. I go over and do fights in England on Channel 5, and the British boxing scene, they have many stars, they have many great fights. Fans are engaged. It's great. And, of course, in other parts of the world like that as well, especially Latin America. But in America, the lack of media coverage has made the sport more of a niche sport.
Got you. And can you tell fans maybe how they could reach you on Twitter or?
Yeah, they can. It's at Al Bernstein, and you can tweet me there. You can get me on Facebook. And of course, I mentioned the boxing channel, which is boxingchannel.tv. They can see my work there. So I'm very engaged in the social media and the internet. It's the new medium through people like you that where people cover the sport.
Gotcha.